All right. So today I'm going to try to go a little bit over the rapture. I won't get in huge details, but I'm going to give kind of an overall picture of what the rapture is. And also I want to look at, when we look at Revelation, why there's so much controversy. You can hear one view from one person, one view from another person, one view, because there's different views of how people interpret Revelation. But there is obviously only one correct view, because there's going to be one rapture. There's either a rapture or there's not a rapture. Let's look at a couple of the views. One view is called preterist. All right, that's someone who believes the major part of the prophetic scriptures, such as Matthew 24, have already been fulfilled in 70 A.D. When Jerusalem was overtaken by the Roman Empire. So they believe when you read Matthew 24, all those events, all the future has already taken place. So all the prophecies we see has already taken place. That's their view. Then you have a historical view. That's the historical view is from John's day until second coming, identifying current events or leaders of the history of today as fulfilling prophecy. So they're saying from the time John, he had the vision until the second coming, and all the things that we see happening there are historical and building up. Like the mark of the beast was a historical event during the Roman Empire, or things maybe leaders we see now, such as Reagan, or the things we've heard in the past as being in the book of Revelation. Then there's what's called the idealist. The idealist is symbolic. It's a representation of good and evil continuing. That's all it is. It's symbolic. It's not futuristic. Doesn't mean anything prophetic. It's just our struggle against good and evil. It's symbolic. So it makes it very difficult to understand. And then there's the futurist view. Except the first 3 chapters, John is describing events that will occur at the end of history only. That's the view I follow, and the view most theologians follow nowadays. It's not a new view. Some people say it's a new view. No, it's the same view that when we study the Bible, you'll see the apostles follow too. Like I said, the view is the first 3 chapters that we see here, except that everything's future. So the futurist view, which I follow, means none of this stuff has taken place. The stuff you see now is not prophetic out of Revelation. So we'll look at that. Also, what I want to look at is, let's look at an outline. I want to look at the outline of Revelation. We need to kind of go over this a little bit to understand the position where the rapture happens, when it happens, and where it happens. That's why I'm going to kind of go over this. I'm going to build it up so we can kind of see. One thing, the reason I told you about the views is because when you're listening to somebody who's preaching or teaching, if you don't know what view they follow, you can get very confused. And so they'll say, oh, are we going to be raptured in the mid? All of a sudden they'll say we're not raptured. All the different views are symbolic, and you can get very, very confused. You need to know, whoever's teaching prophecy, what their view is. There's other views too we haven't even talked about. Those are just your 4 basic views that people follow. So what we want to look at is that Revelation is outlined chronologically. Okay, chronological. So it gives it to us in order. So things happen in order. Revelation chapter 1, verse 19. This is what it says. Write therefore what you have seen, what is now, and what will take place later. All right? So what we're seeing in chapter 1, all right, that's the things that which you have seen. That's okay? That's what he's talking about. That's John's vision of Christ. Then we see the things that which are. That's chapters 2 and 3. That's the church age. That's the age we're in now. That's in their literal churches. He wrote to 7 churches of Asia Minor, which would be like modern day Turkey in that area now. Then you have the things that which shall be after. Okay, that's chapters 4 through 19. That's the tribulation. That's the Daniel, the 70th week. And then chapter 20, the millennial reign of Christ. And chapters 21 and 22, the new heavens and the new earth. All right, so that's kind of the outline. That is the outline that we follow. We're in the age right now in that of chapters 2 and 3. It's called the church age. We'll discuss a little bit more of that in a little while. So let's go over some words, common words that we hear too, so we'll kind of understand what some of the words are when we hear these words. Okay, tribulation. So a lot of people say, well, we have tribulation. We're going to go through the tribulation. We have tribulation. Okay? Yes, there is tribulation. There's a couple mentions of tribulation. There is the affliction, trouble, and pressure, and distress of nowadays. We're not promised that we won't have tribulation in life. But that's not the same thing as the tribulation at the end time. John 16:33 says that we will be afflicted and troubled during this time. That's not the great tribulation. So we have tribulation now that while we're living. Then there's the tribulation that we know what we look at in the last 7 years. That's the last 7 years of the final 7 years in then the book of Revelation. And that's also the Daniel's 70th week. Then there's the Great Tribulation. We've heard of the Great Tribulation. The Great Tribulation is still in the 7-year period, but the last 3.5 years of is the greatest part of the tribulation, is the greatest distress. You see that in Matthew 24:21, where it says there'll be no time greater than this. Then there's what we call the day of the Lord. You hear always the reference to the day of the Lord. Zechariah 14 gives the best reference to that. It gives you from the day of the Lord, and it goes all the way into the millennial reign. The day of the Lord is the judgment of the Lord, the judgment that's coming on, righteous judgment is coming on earth, the second coming. Okay, that's the day of the Lord. That's what it's referring to. You see it all through Joel. You see it through Obadiah, through all the Old Testament. So the day of the Lord is the return of Christ, his judgment day. Then you have Daniel, the 70th week, which is based on 9:24 through 27. That refers to the final 7 years before Christ's return. That's a whole different study in itself. We won't study that today. The week being a period of 7 years, not 7 days. So it's a representation of 7 years, not 7 days, when you do a study on that. And of course, what we're talking about today, the rapture. The rapture, people say, well, I've never seen the word rapture in the Bible. The word Trinity isn't in the Bible either, but we believe in a triune God. For instance, in the beginning, Elohim. Elohim is plural. 3, triune God. So the word rapture comes out of the Latin Vulgate. It was the Latin word rapture. The word that we use out of the Greek is to be harpaz, which means to be caught up, to be snatched up, to be taken out of. All right, quickly removed, forcefully removed. So yes, in our English Bibles, unless you have the old King James Version, it won't say the word rapture. It'll say caught up. That's the proper word for it, actually, harpaz. All right, that's the Greek word. Then also a couple other views we're going to look at that we hear. When is the rapture going to happen? One is we have the pre-tribulation rapture. That's the church will be raptured before the 7 years tribulation begins. All right, the church will not pass through any of the tribulation. That's the view I hold, and the view I'll be teaching you today. Then there's the mid-tribulation belief. Mid-tribulation believes that the church will be raptured midpoint through 3.5 years at the 3.5 year point of the tribulation, and then they'll return back later on with the Lord. Okay. Then we have what's called the pre-wrath rapture. The pre-wrath rapture happens. The church will be raptured approximately midway through the second half, and about 1.5 years or 2 years before the Lord's return. That will go through a lot of the wrath of the tribulation. And then there's also the post-tribulation rapture, where the church will be raptured at the end of the tribulation period, at the end of time when the Lord returns. So meaning that the church itself, the church meaning us, and we'll talk more about that, will go through the whole tribulation period. Well, we're going to discuss more of that today, and that's our starting, and we're going to be going on part 2 here in just a minute.